The Oakland Raiders, the bad boys of the NFL, known for flashy offenses and defenses that will crush your windpipe. They really were synonymous with the city of Oakland and the Bay as a whole for most of their history. I know now they've moved across state lines to Las Vegas and have a slick new stadium, but how did we get here? I'm Jake with FootballLore, and today we'll be investigating just why the Raiders ended up leaving Oakland for browner pastures in Las Vegas. If you like NFL videos, then be sure to press that like button. The Raiders actually got their start as a franchise by accident. The Vikings were originally going to join the AFL, but at the last minute got an offer to join the NFL instead. Even at the time, the NFL was a much larger league, so obviously the Vikings jumped at the offer, but this left the AFL scrambling to find a football team by their season start in a few months. At the time, Oakland hadn't even expressed any interest in having an NFL team, and they didn't have an ownership group in place to operate a team in the area. The city didn't even have a football stadium capable of housing an NFL game. Regardless, the Chargers owner threatened to abandon his franchise if a second team wasn't placed on the West Coast, so they awarded the team a franchise. A local council meeting met to figure out what to do with this franchise they didn't really ask for, and a limited partnership was founded to own the team, led by a real estate developer named Charles Soda. They ended up breaking ground on the Harney-Way Stadium shortly after and held a contest to determine the new franchise's name. Originally, they had selected the Oakland Seniors, but after the town bullied the name, they changed to the Raiders, which had come in third in the contest. The Raiders picked their team colors at the time of black, gold, and white, and they had to find a stadium to play in while their new one was being built. They decided to play in Kezar Stadium in San Francisco instead, and wound up losing their first game in September to the Houston Oilers. After some negotiations, the Raiders were allowed to move to Candlestick Park at the end of their inaugural year, 1960. This was the first time professional football was played at Candlestick Park, but the change of stadiums meant fan support dwindled. They lost about 5,000 average fans once they made the change. Soon, the partnership transferred to just two owners, and in 1962, they made a huge change, which was hiring Al Davis to be the head coach and manager of the team. At 33, he was the youngest person to hold the position of head coach at the time, and was the youngest GM too. He changed the colors to silver and black, and started to change their offensive scheme to a derivative of the West Coast offense. This brought immediate success, and the Raiders had their first winning season where he won Coach of the Year. During this time, he penned many famous Raiders slogans like "Just Win Baby" and "Commitment to Excellence." In 1966, Al Davis was made commissioner of the AFL, and 2 months later, the league would merge with the NFL. As a result of the merger, he was out of the job and ended up purchasing 10% ownership in the team and becoming a general partner of operations. In 1967, they ended up winning the AFL championship before losing the Super Bowl to the Green Bay Packers, and they remained competitive throughout the decade. They had another icon join their ranks in 1969 when John Madden became the head coach and propelled them to great success in the 70s. The team developed a tough reputation and a take-no-prisoners attitude with players like Jim Otto, Gene Upshaw, and Art Shell. You couldn't forget George Blanda, Fred Biletnikoff, or Ken Stabler either. In 1970, the league restructured, and the Raiders were played in a new division where they went all the way to the conference championships. In 1972, while a partner was out of the country, Al Davis staged a coup where he had all operational command signed over to his control. In 1976, this would cause that owner to sell his shares to Davis, which gave him 25% of all equity. Before the 1980 season, Al Davis had tried to have the city of Oakland make improvements to their stadium, including the addition of luxury boxes. When the city declined, he filed a memorandum to move the team to Los Angeles instead, and when the vote failed, he decided to move the team anyways. He became embroiled in an antitrust lawsuit from the league, but he didn't care and proceeded forward with the move, and the Raiders played their first game in the Coliseum in 1982. From 1982 to 1995, the team played in Los Angeles, but eventually their stadium there also became outdated, so he decided to relocate back to Oakland in 1995. The move came with the promise to increase seating capacity in the Oakland Stadium to 20,000, and when it was finished, it was called Mount Davis for Al Davis's honor. While the move was greatly supported by fans, the team struggled from 2000 2004 until they moved. They had a Super Bowl appearance in the early 2000s, but really weren't much of a threat for most of the decade, with gigantic busts like Jamarcus Russell being primarily what they were known for instead of their on-the-field performance. Al Davis was in his 80s with declining health in the early 2010s, but he didn't care that he was getting old. He refused to allow anyone else to make decisions when it came to football operations. He made all draft picks, signings, and personnel choices himself until the very end, and in 2011, while still in charge of operations, he would pass away at his home. This was a huge hit to Raiders Nation, as Al Davis had inspired a lot of the heart the franchise had. A lot of the chip on the shoulder attitude they displayed was inspired by him. At this point, with his family taking over, tensions began to flare up between the new owners and the city of Oakland. The capacity at their stadium was one of the worst in the league, and the city of Oakland also was not in a good situation. Their economy had pretty much evaporated, and it began to be known as a rough area you wouldn't really want to be caught in. This led to people moving out, which really dropped the tax revenue the city had to make improvements, and building a new stadium was out of the question. The Raiders decided to build a stadium in LA and relocate back to Los Angeles, but the league instead allowed the Rams and Chargers to relocate to the newly built SoFi Stadium instead. With LA off the board, the younger Davis turned his attention to Las Vegas, who had promised to build a brand new state-of-the-art stadium. They had spent 10 years trying to secure funding for the stadium in Oakland, and it wasn't going to happen. Their stadium had begun to fall into disrepair, and they really needed a new facility to make games happen profitably. Their stadium in Oakland had gotten so bad that it wasn't unusual for them to have sewage backups into the stadium, which left a crappy taste in fans' mouths. This new Vegas stadium would have all the luxury boxes alongside the ability to charge a ton more for tickets. From a purely business perspective, they had to pick between a town with a bad economy that couldn't build them a stadium or a vacation destination with inflated prices that wanted to build them $1 billion stadium. It was a no-brainer, especially after they had missed out on the chance to move back to LA. While them and the Chargers had wanted to move initially, the Rams owner being willing to self-finance the stadium was a huge reason they had been passed over when push came to shove over moving to LA. In 2017, the Raiders officially announced that they would be relocating to Las Vegas once their stadium was completed. They were going to be staying in Oakland until their stadium was finished in 2020, and Mark Davis was excited to be moving to a new market. After taking over, many felt he had just been a smaller version of his father, but this move was him putting his own mark on the franchise and making it his own. Obviously, he will always be the son of Al Davis, but I think in his mind, this was a way to take back some of the power and put his own spin on the franchise his wealth comes from. Their new stadium was also incredible. Allegiant Stadium is a dome right off of the Las Vegas Strip that ended up costing $1.9 billion to develop. It was literally the second most expensive stadium in the world to build after SoFi Stadium in LA. The difference is the Raiders don't have to share it with another team. It's black and silver, which ties perfectly into the Raiders branding, and has even earned the nickname Roomba because, let's be honest, it looks like at any moment it is going to start trying to clean your house, whether you're ready or not. The Raiders got to pick almost all aspects of the stadium. They even got to hire the architect that designed it. The difference is almost all the bill was footed by the taxpayers of Nevada, and when you have to pay resort fees to stay on the Strip. Everything in this desert oasis costs an arm and a leg, and paying for this stadium definitely made them take the kidney as well. However, what you have left is one of the best stadiums in the league, and definitely one of the prettiest ones at that. Speaking of ownership, I do think Mark Davis is not going to be moving anytime soon. Las Vegas is a booming market, and realistically, he has it cornered when it comes to football. He is worth $1.9 billion himself, and there are definitely not very many places better to be a super wealthy franchise owner than Las Vegas. He can enjoy all the amenities of the Strip, own luxury real estate, look at his massive stadium he didn't have to pay for, and be a celebrity in the town. While a lot of those things weren't possible in Oakland, I do think the odds of them ever leaving Las Vegas are slim to none. It just doesn't make too much sense from a lifestyle point of view. I also think he will never sell the Raiders to another owner. One of the biggest reasons he was picked to inherit the team was that he had been involved in the Raiders retail business for most of his career. In fact, he spent so much time around the Raiders that he was representing them in contract negotiations against his dad. He had helped Cliff Branch secure more money from the team and actually was kicked out of his father's house for being too close to the players. He lives and breathes Raiders football. It's literally a part of his identity, just like his haircut is. The only reason they would really move is if a new ownership group took over and wanted to switch things up. But even then, there aren't many markets better than Las Vegas without a football team. Sure, they might want to move somewhere and compete, but the Chargers' revenue has shown it isn't always a good option to try to compete for market share, even in the largest markets. Overall, the Raiders ended up in a good spot. It sucks Oakland lost their team, but I think this is a much better fit for the team as a whole. That is why the Raiders ended up leaving Oakland, mainly because their stadium was filled with literal sewage, and also because Las Vegas had a lot more for them as a franchise. If you enjoyed this video, then I would appreciate you pressing the like button so it gets recommended to more people. If you love football videos, we post 2 of them a week, and our last video was a dive into all the times the Patriots have been caught cheating, so be sure to check it out. Thank you so much for watching.